Vikram Ekambaram. I'm going to call you Vic if that's okay.
Perfectly
Uh,
fine.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Next Door. Thank you for doing this. Let's start with a relatively quick introduction. Who are you? What do you do? Uh, don't reveal too many secrets because I have some questions for you.
Sure. Yeah. Uh, I live in New York. I've been here almost 26 years. I landed in the US from India 26 years ago. I've worked in various software companies. So various small companies that got bought by Oracle, then Microsoft, and then Tableau, and then they got bought by Salesforce, and then most recently Gong. I've worked in various technical and go-to-market roles, sales roles, post-sales roles. I recently started my own company, Visceral Solutions, back in February, consulting with companies on go-to-market with a focus on Gen AI. So that's what I do.
Okay, so we may hit some technical terms as we talk about your universe and what we can learn from you. I always like to streamline and simplify, especially tech terms, because my audience there's quite a few SaaS founders, and SaaS, for those who don't know, is software as a service. But not everybody is a techie, and not everybody knows the universe of IT as well as you do. So once in a while, I'll stop and say, let's explain it to an 8-year-old Vic so that everybody is comfortable with what we're talking about. Um, you you went to school in India. You got a Bachelor of Engineering in Computer Science, then an MBA in Marketing, which makes you dangerous because it's what I have, and I have to be careful in what I say. And then I guess just the middle of COVID, you went and got a MIT Sloan AI Artificial Intelligence, I guess, certification, something like that. Okay. So I wanted to spend just a few minutes on not necessarily your childhood, but were your aspirations when you were a teenager? Did you think you were going to wind up as a geek, IT guy, computer science, or or not? And again, I'm from Israel, you're from India. We share a lot of commonalities in culture, in upbringing, and approach to the universe. And one thing that our culture share very tightly is education is key. Uh, I think Israel is probably a little bit easier than India because in your country you have to be either an engineer or a doctor. So I think you fulfilled one of them. But anyway, so there's the question. When you were a teenager, what do you want to do when you grow up?
Yeah, no, I mean, that wasn't even a question that I thought about, right? It was, like you said, especially when I was growing up in India. Now I think it's very different. Now a lot of when I look at friends and friends' kids, they have many more choices when it comes to career. But when I was growing up, it was pretty straightforward. You wanted to be an engineer or a doctor or a chartered accountant, a CPA, and that was it. Those were your three choices, right, in terms of careers. And my dad was an engineer, and I was pretty good at math and sciences, so it was pretty obvious that I was going to be an engineer. And that was it. Now, in terms of what kind of engineer, the funny thing about India and the engineering system is that you don't say, I want to be an engineer. It's based on your ranking. You get placed in a, and so if you are higher ranked, then you get certain types of engineering. And then, it's like as you go lower in the ranking, what's left for you are I would say,
Hmm.
lesser engineering. So I
So
ended up, yeah, with computer
it's
science.
fascinating. So
Yeah.
the question I guess is, how does the ranking take place? Is it based on tests that you take and then your test results?
Yes. So you take an
Okay.
entrance exam to get into a college.
Yeah.
And then in that entrance exam, you place. So it's a national exam, and then you place depending on how you score. And the higher ranked people get to do things like computer science and electronics and electrical
Mm.
engineering. And so there was a whole kind of. And so, funny story is, I had never touched a computer. I had never seen a computer. And I went in to do my engineering in computer science. And I think the first time I actually touched a computer was in my second year in college. So it goes to show how much I wanted to do or I was excited about computer science. And the funny thing is, when I graduated, I hated computer science, and I was like, I don't want to do anything to do with computer science. I don't like programming. And so I ended up doing my MBA. I was very sure that I wanted to be in sales and marketing.
Mm.
And then I
It,
did my
it-
MBA and I got a job at Whirlpool in sales, and I hated sales. I met a friend at a wedding who said, hey, you want to come to the US and be a programmer? And I was like, hey, I got this degree in computer science. I guess I can use it. And so back here I was. I started out as a programmer in the US. So,
so it's poetic justice. You hated programming, you went to marketing, you got a sales job, hated that, went back to programming.
yeah.
Which is okay. Interestingly, my early career was in IT, not as a programmer, but as a marketing guy. And the people that I worked with were people like you, and they were programmers. And I think you need a certain, obviously, I don't know if you should say, I should say you need to be smart. I don't know what smart means, but you need an aptitude in order to be a programmer for sure. Um, but I also, at least from my observation from those early years, there was also certain personality types that were attracted to the programming universe, and they were sort of reclusive. They were not social butterflies. They were not super friendly. They were not unfriendly, but they were in their universe with the screen and the keyboards, and nothing was ever perfect, right? There was always a 1.0, a 2.0. It's like chasing perfection in programming, which I'm sure is part of the DNA. But anyway, that's sort of like a side story. So I want to jump in and kind of read off what you gonna say in on your LinkedIn profile, and we'll just dive right into this. And there's going to be a couple of things that I'm going to read off that are techie, so you'll get to explain it. All right, here we go. So GTM is broken, and GTM in marketing entrepreneurship terminology is short for go to market. And I'll let you explain what that means, but you say it's broken. Sales, outbound, customer success are all struggling. The old ways are now working, and Gen AI, so it's one word, GENAI, is going to usher in its own disruption. Okay, so that's a loaded sentence, right? So let's break it down. Let's unpack this. What's broken about go? So let's explain first, so everybody's on the same page with you and me as a marketing guy. What is go to market?
Yeah. So go to market to me are all the activities that happen in an organization to bring your product to market, which is the marketing of the product, the selling of the product, the demoing of the product, and then even after that, the installation, the implementation, and then making sure that the customer is getting the value from the product. So it's a very broad umbrella of terms. A lot of times people tend to associate go to market primarily with marketing, which there's another term called top of funnel. And so the funnel being you have a lot of prospects that come into the funnel and very few customers that come out of the funnel. And so top of funnel is, do a lot of marketing activities to get people into the funnel. And then as they go through the sales process, then a small subset of them come out as customers. The way I like to think about it, and I think there's a person called Jocko who really talks about it not being a funnel, but being a bow tie. Because if you don't, in a subscription world, make those customers successful, then they churn. And so all the effort you spend trying to get somebody and you lose them very quickly. And
Right.
so you
And
can't,
again,
it's not just about buying the customer. But yeah, so that's, what I think of as go to market.
okay.
Yeah.
So in maybe oversimplifying even more, I have an idea. I do everything that needs to be done to at least validate that the idea, the product, or the service has merit, that there's target market, or there's enough market there for me to pitch this to and scale up and grow. We do all this work. Marketing is part of it. The business planning and the financing, fine. And now we're all ready to go. We either have a seed round of financing or we use our own money, and it could be a one-person project. There could be a bunch of founders getting together. It doesn't matter. So the preliminary is done. Now we're at the stage of, okay, now we have to go out there, let the universe know we exist, sell some stuff, service it, install it, all the stuff that happens, right? You go from idea into practicality okay, I've got a business. Now I got to stop making money. The only way I make money is find customers, make them happy, right? I'm oversimplifying.
Yep.
So you're saying this process is broken. Why?
So, kind of jumping to the end, I think the reason the process is broken is because software as a service and cloud specifically, so cloud being vendors like Amazon with AWS, Amazon Web Services, and Microsoft with Azure, and Google with their Google Cloud, made it very, very easy for vendors to build products. In the past, if I go back to 2003 when Tableau was formed, and when somebody wanted to build a software product back then, you had to have servers that you managed in your own data center. And so you had to manage the server, you had to install software on it, and then you built your product on top of it. And so, as you can imagine, building a product and then bringing it to market required a lot of money and effort. So you had to buy all these expensive servers, and then they had to scale up. And so all of that was expensive. And then around 2008, cloud came out, and Amazon and Microsoft and Google made it really easy for anybody with a credit card to basically rent servers in the cloud. And so you could now wake up with an idea. And if you were a developer, you could very quickly bring your product and get it to that, product market fit that you talked about. Doing that, the barrier to entry went really low.
Mhm.
And so when that happened, suddenly now what happens is there are tons and tons of products out there. Almost every product that is launched, there are 5 other people who are doing something similar. So it becomes highly competitive. And so now when you look at it from a vendor standpoint, finding new customers is hard because the customers are now getting inundated with so many different vendors who are all claiming to do the same thing. They all sound the same. They all look the same. And so that happened. The second thing which broke is we started coming out with outreach platforms. So these are technologies that made it easy for salespeople to, lack of a better term, spam prospects. So they could basically send 1,000 emails using technology very, very quickly. And so now, if you think about it, you as a buyer or a business user, if you're getting inundated, you stop looking at emails from vendors. Then you had armies of cold callers calling you. And so you stop picking up your cell phone now because if you don't see a number you don't recognize, you don't pick it up anymore.
Mhm.
And so there used to be, if you go back 10 years, because the volume wasn't that high and there weren't so many tools and technologies out there, you could call somebody, they would pick up the phone, you could try and pitch your, it's kind of the old door-to-door salesman became on the phone salesman or the email salesman. But now those two channels, once you take it out, how does somebody reach new customers in an extremely crowded marketplace? So that's the first thing which got broken. And then after that, the other part of it is because now customers have so much choice. The second thing which changed was companies used to sell what is known as perpetual licensed software, which is if you wanted a software, you bought the software from the company, you owned the software, and then you used to pay a small fee to get like upgrades and maintenance renewals. And so let's say you spend $100 on the software, and then after that, every year you spend 15, 20 as maintenance. Guess what? You don't think about replacing the software because you have a sunk cost. And then somewhere along the way, Salesforce started this. It became about subscription pricing, which is you spend $40 every month or every year for your software. Instead of spending the $100 upfront and 20, let's say you spend $40. Now the cost to renew is the same as the cost to buy. So you suddenly look at it and you say that, oh, I'm not using the software. Like it's like your Netflix subscription. You get a Netflix subscription, you get a Hulu subscription, you get a Disney Plus, you get Paramount. And then one day you look at it and you say, I'm not using this, I'm just going to cancel it. And so your ability to cancel becomes very easy. And so suddenly now that part of the process starts breaking where you could no longer just sell software to customers. You have to make sure that your software is delivering value that is driving business outcomes for companies. And a lot of software companies are not very good at driving business outcomes. They're very good at selling. So that part of the process also got, disrupted.
So the first part of, and I didn't want to interrupt you. So the first part of what you said was really, in simple terms, the commoditizing of everything that had to do with software as a service, right? We're talking mostly, particularly software, things that you buy. Where there used to be a barrier of entry, but now the barrier is gone. Everybody and anybody can develop an app and host it somewhere on AWS, Amazon, or Google, whatever, and off you go and you do it. So what's left for them is Okay, so that piece has been disrupted in terms of it costs a lot less, but now the real costs are the marketing of how do I let people know I exist and get them to subscribe to buy my software. You also used the word before. The word was churn, churn, in the software as a service universe. Churn means customers that do what you just said, bail out, subscribe, unsubscribe from the software. And by the way, I do this all the time with the channels that you mentioned on TV because they tease you with an interesting series. The only way you could see it is if you subscribe, and it's a trial. So it's 7 day free, and then it converts to a paid subscription. And if you actually look at, as I have, all these subscriptions to these channels, and it adds up pretty quickly. But I think most people don't pay attention to it because they don't turn it on. Uh, so it's really interesting because I'm definitely older than you, but I remember the days where when I got into business, as you mentioned, and it's important to have to go back and talk about it because people take what we have today for granted, right? Like in the old days, I was in marketing, we had salespeople. Well, how do you sell? Well, you go cold calling, meaning you drive around, your sales guy drive around with a list and you knock on the door, and if they let you in, you pitch your thing, and maybe after 50 of those cold calls, maybe you get one customer. So that was one thing. Then we used to go to trade shows. And then we used to advertise in print magazines. We used to put actually real ads. There was something called the Yellow Pages, which is pretty funny because it doesn't exist. Then we also made cold calls on the phone, right? So we would try to get to decision makers. And the problem was that every company had a receptionist. And the receptionist, if you could get through her, she transfer you to the executive or the manager's secretary, because we used to have those at the time. The secretary was well trained to not get calls through because everybody was using the phone. And there was a whole industry and a science around how do you get around the receptionist? How do you get around the secretary? And the thing that actually worked. So how did they get around? Well, they engaged the person in a discussion. So how things are going, and they wrote notes of how many kids she has and maybe their birthdays, and you develop this personal relationship. And when you call, they actually pass you through, right? It worked for a while, but it stopped working. Um, the best thing that worked, by the way, Vic, for cold calling decision makers was actually to call first thing in the morning, early, like at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, or before the secretary came in. And then usually guys like us were sitting at the desk really early, and the phone rang, you pick up the phone, so you call, right? And of course, we had direct mail, which was putting a postage stamp on something and sending it out. And then email showed up, and why don't I need to put a stamp on something when it could be free, right? So, as you said, we went from that to now with technology, everybody has access to almost everyone, and they use that access, and for the most part, it's free, right? It doesn't cost anything. Um, so I used to. I'm gonna be quiet in a second, but you got me all excited. I used to give talks. I would ask the audience. Here's a question for you. When is it, or when was it a lot more difficult to do marketing? Was it in the days that I grew up and I explained, the old world of this is how we did it. We cold call, we phone, or today. Okay. So compare the two, right? Today versus back then. And everybody without hesitation said, well, it's so much easier to do it today because we have access to everyone. And I said to them, no, you're wrong. This today is actually way more difficult than the way I started because you actually had the personal connection and you were doing something. What you said was the commoditization of being able to store things on the cloud almost at marginal cost allows everybody to be in the business. And so everybody is on top of you. Um,
I think the other piece why it's so hard today is the fragmentation. And we're seeing this. I mean, you go back when we were, growing up and stuff like that, you had the cable companies and you got your cable subscription and you got a bunch of channels. You didn't control the content that came to you, but there was one place you went to. It was simple. Now you have 20 different choices of things to choose from. I mean, do you go, subscribe to Fubo TV? I don't even know what Fubo TV is, but it keeps showing up, and YouTube TV, right? And then suddenly you look at it and you're like, there are 20 of them. They all seem to do the same thing. Which one do I pick? And next thing you know, it's harder for me to make a decision today
Yeah.
because there's just too much choice. And the funny story I always tell people is when I was in India, and I would go to the store to buy toothpaste or shaving cream, whatever. It was an easy experience. It was a small store. I went in and I bought it. When I first came to the US, I remember first time I walked into a supermarket, I walked right out. I couldn't buy anything because I just couldn't. I didn't have any framework to make decisions. I didn't know. Like I went to buy toothpaste and suddenly there's like 20 varieties. And then if you spend your time looking at each one of them, trying to figure out which is better, which is worse, what is this offering, you're like you have no idea. And
Yeah.
that's I think
Yeah.
where we are, where it's like this commoditization of software. It's like, and now with AI it's becoming even worse. Like there's like 10 different versions of everything. Oh, you wanted to record calls, there are 20 pieces of
Yeah.
software you could buy to do it. Which one do you pick? They all seem the same. You don't have time to sit and evaluate every one of them. And so that's where I think it's making it really hard for people to make decisions because there's just too much choice, if there's
So
such a thing.
we used to say that let's use the year 2000 as the official the birth of the internet, even though it was earlier. But maybe from a commercialization standpoint, 2000 was really the year. So certainly the year I started playing with websites. And so we used to say that, okay, so why was the internet so disruptive? Because its knowledge is power. Now the knowledge transferred from people who sell to people who buy. Now I don't have to believe what the salesperson tells me. I can go very quickly do research and find out for myself, right? And so now what we're talking about is that's now been disrupted. Now there is just way too much knowledge, not enough time to do an intelligent selection or filtering of what's relevant, what's not, right? Plus the incoming barrage of junk, and people are, well, they're busy. They're busy doing stupid things, but they're busy, right? They're busy with technology all day long. So, because we're marketing guys, then when somebody is stressed out and has anxiety about making a buying decision, I think they're going to do one of two things. Either they don't make the decision, they stay with what they have, or more often than not, they'll pick the cheapest solution, right? So that it allows them to maybe feel better that they have something. But
Well, I think I would say it all comes down to, so one is cheaper solution, but even there, would there's a trust aspect to this. I think people go to brands. Like it's just easier to buy from a Microsoft if they offer some version of this because I already have a relationship with them, a contract with them, and it's Microsoft. It can't be too bad. Because if you go with some kind of small startup, there is always this risk that it doesn't work, and then now you're stuck with the piece of software that doesn't work, and you spend money on it. So I think what I've noticed is that as categories become commoditized, there is a shift towards best of brand. It's just easier because the brands then start adding enough features. Like, would you want to buy Zoom or would you buy Teams? And you might be like, Teams is not as good as Zoom, but it's good enough. Would you buy Slack or would you buy Teams? And you're like, Microsoft, I've already got a contract with them. So that's the kind of, it's good enough. So the brands will add good enough functionality and then the pure plays will always struggle trying to compete with the brand. But then the pendulum switches whenever a new technology comes in, because anytime a new technology comes in, these startups are the ones that are innovating and like at the front. And so then you go back to best of breed. But then over time, that technology starts commoditizing and then you go back to best of brand. And so there's this switch which happens. I feel like where, again, this thing is completely getting broken now is just that in the past, there used to be a handful of startups. Now for everything you want to go solve, and to your point, it's like I can go to the internet and search, but it does not return one result and say this is the best one. It returns 20 results. And then now you're looking at it like me in the supermarket saying, okay, now I have 20 things I could purchase. They all seem to claim to do what I do. Which one do I pick? Do I sit and evaluate every one of them, get on a demo, talk to them, blah, blah, blah. And you may or you may not, or you might, like you said, end up not making a decision, or you might just pick. The other thing I do see is people are leveraging their networks. They're reaching out to people they know, and they're saying, hey, listen, you know what? It's like, blah, blah, blah. Have you heard of anyone of this? And then they'll be like, okay, somebody told them that they've used it. It's like how I find my handyman or whatever, right? I ask my
Yeah.
network quickly, and somebody says, yeah, I use this guy. And I'm like, all right, you know what? I don't have time to sit and figure this out. You like him, I like him.
Yeah, so I mean, we can almost, and again, we're talking about software primarily, but it applies to everyday decisions, of course. And you're right. You would ask your neighbors, well, who are you using? And if they all say we're using brand X, then the safest choice is to pick what everybody else is using, right? Because you don't want to regret your decision. It's an interesting concept because there's a company in the world of home improvements is a spin-off or uses a really well-known brand, and I won't say who they are, so we'll keep them innocent for now. Um, and their play is playing on that national recognized brand to the point of an absolute slaughter when it comes to their pricing strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Their pricing is typically easily 5 to 10 times more than a comparable product, good product that you would buy. But the strategy is what we just said. Everybody knows that brand name. Lots of the home have those things installed. And so, yes, I'm not gonna sell this to every homeowner, but the conversion is, yeah, we're human beings. We don't want to make mistakes, especially if it's a high ticket item. For software, corporate decision makers versus small business decision makers when it comes to purchasing software or getting applications that help the business run better. Um, I think for me, it's always been because I've been in B2B my entire life. It's always been the same thing, and that's how I trained everybody. I said, look, if Vic is the one who's always going to make a decision whether to buy Salesforce or buy HubSpot, okay? Vic, as a human being working in a company, cares on one of two things only: make me a hero, but don't embarrass me where I could potentially lose my job. I don't want to be the guy in that conference room when that software is bugging out and literally paralyzing the company or causing us some real damage. I don't want to be the guy that everybody says, well, who recommended it, right? So it's safer to pick, like you said, best of brand, whatever. Not
Yep.
necessarily the case that it's really the best product for you. So it's all like the psychology of buying. So I think now we understand why you said sales, outbound customer success, they're all struggling and they're all
So,
struggling.
yeah,
Go ahead.
one thing to add on the customer success, because that's also something which probably your audience might not be aware of, just like when I used the term churn, is customer success is a relatively new function that was created, did not exist till, I would say, software as a service became prevalent and subscription licensing became prevalent. So if you go back to when Oracle used to sell perpetual licenses, you spend $100 with Oracle and then you're paying the maintenance. The Oracle sales rep, once they sold, never really spent any time with you because they're like, hey, you bought the
Mhm.
software, you're not going anywhere. And
Yeah.
the entire risk was on your part as the buyer. Like if you did not get value from the software, too bad. You'd already spent the money, $100 was gone. And so you were like, I'm going to somehow figure out how to use it. Once it became subscription, you're like, let's just spend $40 and next year it's going to be $40 again. Since the cost to renew is the same as the cost to buy, you're like, if I don't get value from this thing, you look at it and you say, oh, I'm not watching any of these shows. I'm going to cancel my subscription. Same thing with software. I bought that. I thought I was going to use it. I'm not. I'm going to cancel. So the software vendors realized suddenly that they would sell a lot of customers and then a whole bunch of them would end up canceling their subscription and churning. And suddenly they realized that that was not a viable business model. And so they then invested in a function called customer success, and they had a resource whose job was to make sure that the customer was successful with the product and got value out of it so that they would renew. Because if you think about it, if I spend $40 in year one and you're happy and you keep the software for 5 years, suddenly I made $200 over, And then if I make you happy every year, it's like your Netflix subscription. I don't have to spend much time. Netflix is making $10 on you every month or $15, and that's just going. And so this whole function called customer success got created. And it worked fine till the economy changed because companies were buying a lot of software, and whether they were getting value or not, there was a lot of fear of missing out. So they were like, oh, everybody is buying the software. I should also buy this. And everybody was flush with funds. And so they bought a lot of technology. Whether they were using it or not, they all felt like they had to buy the technology. They bought it and they kept it. And then when the economy changed and suddenly budgets came under scrutiny, a lot of software vendors started struggling because customers started canceling.
Mhm.
The economy is doing well. You have your 5 subscriptions to Netflix and Peacock and all those things. You don't really care because you got enough money. You're like, I don't really want to worry about it. Suddenly you lose your job. You're like really looking at everything and you're like, I don't need 5 of these. I only need one of that. I want to cancel 4. So that's where what changed was now you had this function which was responsible for making sure customers got value. But a lot of times the sales teams did not really sell the value. They were just selling the product. And so the onus suddenly fell on driving value after the customer bought, and that did not often happen. And so now what's changing in the industry is that the way you want to sell is you want to sell the value during the sales cycle, knowing that some people might not buy because they might be like, this value that you're giving is not good enough, which is a big shift for salespeople. In the past, it usually like, take whatever deal comes in. I don't really care if they're going to, renew or not renew. But now people are realizing that if they don't renew, you lose a lot of money because you're paying a lot of people the upfront cost of selling software. And so that's another piece
So,
which is broken.
so enterprise type software with the ticket is high priced. I think they do this pretty well because it's literally the lifeblood of their business. Because if they blink and they do this the wrong way, when you lose a client on the enterprise side, it could be $250,000. It's not $10 Netflix guy that couldn't
Yeah.
care about. But um, I get really mad when I come across the director of success or director of customer happiness and all this other jargony BS that people come up with. I think it's all window dressing, Vic, because, and I'll tell you why. If you sell enterprise level software licenses at, let's say, from 50,000 to 250 or more, right? You have highly professional sales teams and marketing team that work together because, yeah, the sales cycle might be a year, but then when you sell it, the implementation and when you charge them to implement and set it up, we'll put that aside because they have to do it or they die. For the rest of the universe of small businesses, it's very, very different, right? And so it's all about scaling up in SaaS, right? Software as a service about, well, how quickly can I scale up and how many thousands of subscribers can I get? And let's talk about the elephant in the room. For the majority of founders who start a software as a service business, there is really one goal, and that's to exit and sell the company. And
Or go
so
public. Yeah.
or go public, right? So the only way you get to sell your business for a bunch of millions is by accumulating a very high subscription rate. With You're always going to have churn, but keeping it low. But I don't think they really care about customer success. It's just, and maybe they care, but the implementation is not something they invest in, right? Why is
So
it that
yeah. So this
that
is this is the piece that I feel is changing.
yeah,
If you go back 3 years and you were to say that, these are paying lip service to customer success, there was some element of truth to it because companies were buying and whether they used it or not, they were renewing. And so the metric that customer success was judged by, which was renewal rate, if I have $100 in renewal out of that, if $90 renewed, you're like, oh, 90% renewal rate, it's pretty good from an industry standpoint, and you feel pretty good about it. But once the downturn hit, a lot of companies started looking and saying that I have a lot of this software that is sitting on the shelf, or my people are not using it, or even if we are using it, we don't just have money to go and spend on all of this. I need to cut 2 out of my 10 pieces of software. That number went from, let's say, 90% to 50%. And suddenly that became a big hit for a lot of companies because they were counting on that money and now their revenues dropped and because of people canceling. At which point suddenly they woke up and they were like, we need to really think about customer success differently. And that point of time, companies are now starting to think about is that I need to sell the value during the sales cycle, not just sell the product and hope that the customer gets value and then figure it out later, because those customers are the ones that are churning. Uh,
Yeah, and
yeah.
my only pushback on this is that we look at the renewal as a positive, right? Oh, they renew the subscription, but the renewal is automatic, right? You have your credit card and it's going to get renewed at $100 or $10 Netflix. It renews and people just don't even look at their credit card statement. It's not that significant, right? On enterprise level, completely different. So now if you sent me an invoice every month that I had to pay, I would then, this will be a reminder of do I want to use it? Does it really bring any value to me? There are some companies, very few, that I subscribe to. They would send me a note that says, oh, by the way, 7 days from now is your renewal date, right? That's a nice thing to do because then they remind me that I'm going to renew, but it also sort of a reminder to me. And then if I said no, very few would come back and say, why? Okay, where have we failed you? What is it? And I will tell you that's a true story where a couple of years ago, because I always test different SaaS platforms for my clients, I came across something that I was really excited about, and it's not easy to get excited. Um, and I subscribed. I bought the annual subscription at $150, right? Instead of the savings buying annually were significant. They were smart. It was not 10%, it was close to 30%. So I went for it. And you fast forward to almost a year later, I get a note that says, thank you for being a loyal customer. Just so you know, we're going to charge a credit card in the next couple of days. And I looked at it and I said, my God, I did it. I bought it and I forgot. I never used it. I never used it. So shame on me. It's on me, right? But I was so mad. So I called up and I insisted on getting to somebody, not some call center person. And I finally got to someone who is in management. And I said, let me ask you a question. Of all your subscribers, I'm one of your top best subscribers, right? I said, because I bought an annual subscription. Absolutely. I said, great. So you would love it if I would renew, wouldn't you? Or people like me. Oh, 100%. We love annual subscription. I said, okay. So let me ask you a question. You have, you look at data all day, right? You could tell if I ever logged into my system, can you? Oh, yes, I can. You could also tell that if not only if I logged in, how long I stayed logged in, and you can also tell how I maneuvered around the modules and what I did, right? You could, right? Yes, I did. And if you see that I paid for an annual subscription and then 3 weeks later I didn't log in, would you consider it crazy of me to tell you maybe you should have reached out and said, "Is there a problem, Zev? If you got frustrated with our setup, maybe we can help you. There's a video to do this, right?" And he had no answers for me because I said, "You failed, dude. It's on me. I made a mistake. I bought it. I never used it. Okay, stupid me. But you failed, and so I'm not renewing because I'm a customer success kind of guy. And if you don't care about me, and guess what? I managed to survive a year without the software that I paid for. So obviously, it wasn't disrupted, right? So I think that when we talk about customer success, I don't see a real commitment to it because they don't hire enough people to ensure that their clients are actually getting value out of whatever it is that they subscribe to.
So
It's
yeah.
go ahead.
So
Yeah.
I'll kind of break it up into a few pieces. So we should define business to business and business to consumer, B2B versus
Yes.
B2C. Because in the B2B world, there's no individual buyer. It's usually a buyer committee. And usually, there's a procurement process and you're raising purchase orders and stuff like that. And there's a procurement person whose job is to go buy the software. There are users who go use it. And so in that world, the customer success function, depending on how the customers are tiered. So you have your top tier customers who spend a lot, who will get like a dedicated customer success manager. And it's a business, right? I mean, end of the day, if my cost to make a customer successful with human resources is higher than the cost to acquire the customer, then that business at some point is going to go bust just because of the math.
Yeah.
And then in the B2C world, and I think there's kind of an in-between where there is this term called product-led growth companies, which fit in the middle of kind of B2B and B2C, where they act almost like a business to consumer company in that there are individuals who use it and the individuals renew. And then so there, it's the job of the product to make you successful, because the human never scales. And that's, I think, where customer success is going to go and where AI is going to take things.
Mm.
Excuse me. Is that if I'm signing somebody for $150, for me to put a human on it to go make you successful, and a human I spend whatever, $50,000, $60,000, then I might outsource that human. It might be $10,000, but still, they can probably spend an hour with you. And so this is the part where, there's a business side of like the cost to make the customer successful versus how much did the customer spend, which leads to certain tiering and some people getting the kind of customer success you want and some people don't. The example you gave where, I mean, I would say that's a good example of somebody who did not have a good customer success function, because they were not looking at metrics like, they're supposed to look at metrics like monthly active users, look at users, what is your login, when was your last login, how often are you logging in. They're supposed to have metrics which basically should flag as like, hey, so and so is at-risk customer. So we used to have this term in customer success called an at-risk customer based on data, that I could look at it and look at your usage patterns, and based on that come and say, this person's at risk, in which case got notified to a person who would then reach out to you saying, hey, I've noticed you haven't logged in the last 30 days. Is everything okay? Supposed to be run that way. Some companies do it, some companies don't. Obviously, the ones that do it well have high retention rates, and the ones that don't, based on your example. But I do think that we're going to be in a future where AI, and specifically generative AI and Gen AI, as I kind of call this is going to be find some of these solutions because it can do this stuff at scale.
Right. So now we get to the meat of what you do. So explain it to an 8-year-old. Generative AI, Gen AI, in your terminology. What is it, and how it to for the sake of our discussion of what we just talked about? How does Gen AI, after understanding what that is, how does that now play a role in changing everything that's broken that you listed in the beginning, right? Go to market, outbound sales, customer success. So what's generative AI?
So I think easiest way to explain this is if people have used ChatGPT or heard about ChatGPT, and I assume if you've not heard about ChatGPT, you are under a rock somewhere. Possibly, maybe this podcast is not for you. If you're technical enough to watch a podcast, you should know what generative AI is, or at least have used ChatGPT. And so if you go take a step back and we talk about artificial intelligence as a field has been around since the 1950s when it was first created. And the whole goal at that point of time was to have computers mimic the intelligence of humans. And that was kind of, the artificial intelligence world. And then they've had their kind of ebbs and flows, a lot of hype, then drop and hype and drop. But then in 2011, the first big kind of shift happened. There was enough data. There was now enough processing power with GPUs that computers could start doing things at scale that they could not do before. And it just unlocked a capability where, for the first time in 2011, I think, or 2010, a computer could recognize an image better than a human could. And that was just like the first part where suddenly people were like, wait, I can give an image and a computer is going to be able to figure out what that image means. Shows a level of intelligence, artificial intelligence. And there's a whole underlying technology to it around neural networks and all of that, which made this happen without going into any of that detail. But that then spawned a whole industry around AI where things that you use today that you don't realize have AI, like, it's like when you're using Siri and you're asking Siri a question, or using Alexa, that's natural language processing. It's taking whatever you're verbally saying, converting it into something that can then go and search for something and come back with the result that you want.
Very fast.
Very fast. Exactly. Right. And so that was kind of, so we've started using AI, and that AI has been around now, for till like 2018, 2019. People were using AI, but we were consumers of AI. You and I would not be going and actually using AI ourselves. We were using products that made this available to us because there was still a barrier to entry. Somebody technical needed to go and configure it for us. So I could use it. I needed an iPhone and I needed somebody to build Siri that I could then talk to Siri. I couldn't build my own Siri unless I was like, technical and geeky and all that stuff. But in 2019, OpenAI released ChatGPT, and for the first time, you could actually have a conversation with a computer like you're having a conversation with a person, and it would generate responses. And so it could take your text, and so you could go and ask it a question about, let's say, what does go to market mean? And it would actually respond like a human. So in the past, if somebody were to say, I want to know what go to market is, we would go to Google, we would search go to market, and we would get a bunch of search results. And then I had to go click on each of the search results, read each one of them, and understand what it meant. And then I would create a summary of it.
Mm.
Now with ChatGPT, I could just say, what is go to market? And ChatGPT does that for me. It goes through all those search results. It goes through all of that, understands all of it, formulates a response for me, and then sends it back to me. And so it's like you're now having a conversation with a person. And so it's this generative AI, this ability for AI to generate either content, and that content can be text, video, images, based on prompts that you provided, was the big breakthrough that happened with OpenAI. And then, the rest is history in terms of, I think it was the fastest, most viral product ever compared to all the other TikToks and all those things, and even faster than that, right? Because people suddenly realized they could be like, write me a poem, write me a book, tell me what this is. And instead of it giving you a bunch of search results, it would actually tell you, decipher all of that and give you an answer in, human speakable terms. And so now if you say, oh, wow, that happened, how can I now apply it to solve problems? So we go back to your example. You wake up and you're not using the software. Imagine if something could ping you and say that I've noticed that you're not using the software. Do you have any challenges? So me as a human could pick up the phone and call you and talk to you, and you would tell me whatever it is. And the human would look at their knowledge-based repository, this, that, find something, send you some videos. Instead, imagine there was a chatbot that you could just talk to, and it just responded and it solved your problem for you. And so that's kind of a very simple example that you're starting to see. A lot of products now are adding this kind of chatbot functionality where you can just go ask questions and you'll get responses. And the thing is, those responses are not pre-configured. So in the past, the way responses, like the old version of chatbots, was basically every question had a series of answers, and based on the question you asked, it would find the most similar question and it would give you an answer. And you and I have had those experiences with those chatbots, like when you go to Verizon and you have a support question a couple of years ago, and invariably you would at some point be like, just get me to a human, because it just kept giving you the same 5 responses and you didn't fit into that. But now the technology exists with generative AI where you could have a conversation where it'll understand what you're saying. It can then go search through all the content that exists in its repository and bring the right relevant piece of information to you. And then you can ask follow-on questions. You're like, oh, not that, but what about this? And then it can keep having an ongoing conversation.
And so in simple terms, the AI goes back to a massive database, as you said, repository of information, very, very quickly able to connect what the prompt was or what the question was, extract relevant information. Most of the time, it's actually, you're right, it's better than a Google search. But isn't it some of the criticism that I read about ChatGPT versus Claude or Gemini is that ChatGPT only goes back X amount of years in terms of the repository of information, and so you're limited. If you ask a question that goes further back, then not necessarily going to give you an accurate answer. So is that something that's being addressed where you expand the universe of the knowledge for the Gen AI engine so that the likelihood of continuously relevant responses happen?
Yep. So few answers to that question. So the first thing is that repository of information is the entire internet. So they went and they, like you said, up to a certain date, everything which was on the internet, they went and they brought it in, images, videos, all this stuff, and they're bringing more and more repositories. And what they realized is that if I just give you all the information, and really, the fascinating thing about the technology is it does not understand anything about it. All it knows is that it's predicting the next word. And somehow through predicting the next word, it's able to do this really well.
Just wait. I have a stupid question. The internet domain, the knowledge domain was pretty much Google, right? It was either Google or Microsoft, right? Where all this, so did Google how did the guy from ChatGPT, I forgot his name, how did they go out and grab all that info? They just scrubbed the whole internet and just grab whatever was there,
Yeah, yeah, and
right?
which
They
is
didn't,
why you're getting
yeah.
into a lot of this copyright infringement, why people are, when OpenAI came out with GPT-4o and the voice sounded a lot like Scarlett Johansson, it's able to mimic stuff. You give it something, it's able to replicate that pretty, in a very good way. And so it's been trained on that stuff. I mean, so you train the model and it's been trained on all the information. So yeah, so it's gone, they went and they crawled the whole thing, which is why it's like the last version which came out was till I think April 2023. And then, every new version that comes up, they've just crawled more. But to answer your other question, there are now with like even ChatGPT, when you do go to like, especially if you have the kind of next level subscription, the paid subscription, you have, these custom GPTs where when you do a search, it will not prompt. It can not only go to what's in the ChatGPT model, but can also then do a web search, then combine the two results and give you something back. And so this
Yeah.
combination of a web search plus the GPT search can give you a more accurate result. But the thing is, again, right, it's like the next, when GPT-5 comes out, it's going to be till something 2024. And so I think that, yeah, the corpus of knowledge will become more and more recent over time.
Then I noticed that they now actively use Gemini, which is
Yeah.
their Gen AI engine for all Google searches. So I'll put in a search and you can see Gemini pops up, uh, gives you the answer. They still show the web results because
Mhm.
I think Google makes $1.6 billion on Google Ads, so they have to do
Yep.
it.
Yep.
So it's interesting. So to kind of understand how we started this, so you were saying the old ways are not working. Gen AI is going to usher in its own disruption in terms of go-to-market, customer success, outbound sales. Are we talking sophisticated bots that are going to do the work that the humans failed in? Everything we just talked about in the first
So
half
it's
hour.
it's it'll start off with augmentation. So it is human plus bot or agent as the term that is now coming up. But let's go back to outbound, which we talked about, and we said, hey, listen, there was software which let you send thousands of emails at once. This kind of spray and pray tactic, which is I'm going to get buy a list of 1,000 contacts. I'm going to build one message and I'm going to send it to 1,000 people and spam them, and hopefully somebody opens, and if they do, then they come in and then they become, I can sell them something. What we realize is that now people aren't opening those emails if it's very generic. People will open it if it's tailored to them. Like if I were to say, hey, I saw, you went to school here and I know somebody from there, then chances are you'll be like, oh, I'm going to read that email. But now with Gen AI, it can go look at your LinkedIn profile, pull this information, and it can at scale generate personalized targeted emails and send it out to 1,000 people. So it's going to, yeah, and it can call you. It's going to be able to talk to you in the voice of a human. And so there's going to be a whole disruption where you're going to be like, you're going to now get calls from agents. You're going to get emails from agents which are personalized, targeted, relevant. And there's going to, if you thought like, the volume that was coming at you was a lot, now imagine there's going to be like even more because it's just going to be so easy for it to do these. So we'll have to
my
see how
next
we
quote
navigate that.
for house cleaning will be from Scarlett Johansson.
Yes, could be. Yes,
I mean, look,
exactly.
it's on one hand, it's
Yes.
kind of fascinating, but from a business perspective, uh, we can definitely see the value of AI, right? There's a lot of bad stuff that happens with AI, but the value from a business perspective for audience of entrepreneurs and founders and small business owners, yeah, and again, I think the key is, Vic, is that you've got to use not just the right tool, but you have to use the tool for the right reason, right? You can't use it to to abuse. You can't abuse it. We got to use it for the right
So
reason.
this is the challenge that kind of go into the kind of parallels between religion and technology. They have great power. They can be used for great good and they can be misused for great bad. It's just the two sides of the coin. Nuclear power can be used to power houses. It can be used to build a nuclear bomb, right? It's like science is technology. Social media was great. It's like I can call my mom and talk to her in India for free on WhatsApp. But that same WhatsApp can be used in India to, stoke up fears of communal violence and drive riots and things like that. And it's just, the humans can definitely leverage it for good or for bad. I think the world we're going into, now we're going to have bots that can also now leverage this for good or bad. And that's going to be something which is going to be done at scale that we don't know, right? I mean, it's just, I think it's humanity. It's this duality of humanity, this duality of good versus evil, and like it'll always be there. And anything which is good can very quickly. I mean, it's like I remember, when I was at various companies and we used to do analysis on your strengths and your weaknesses, and you had these 16 personalities, Myers-Briggs, all these tests that we used to
Yeah.
do. What I always noticed was that my biggest strengths were my biggest weaknesses. All it took was that if I took that strength too far, it became a weakness. And that's, I think, what
And
we see with a lot of the technology.
and I think one of the positive aspects about AI is that it's creating a whole new it's a whole new industry with a whole new employment opportunities and business opportunities on a scale, on a very, very large scale. It's already happening, right? It's not like I mean, I was on a webinar with some guy that was selling bots, right? Customized bots for everything. So they call them agents. That's a good word for it. But it's yeah, you're right. I mean, the comparison of religion and technology is actually very powerful. I'm just we're on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is one of these platforms that this didn't start yesterday. It's been ongoing. I thought LinkedIn, still think LinkedIn is a brilliant, brilliant platform for the purpose that it was created, but it's now become an unbelievable, annoying, disrupting spam machine. And with the bots and all these companies that are selling you automated LinkedIn connections and bypassing LinkedIn rules and all this other stuff, because everybody wants to make money and everybody wants to be successful, and they're looking for the path of least resistance, right? What's the easiest way that I can do this? And for a lot of the young generation, it's pressing the enter key on your keyboard, or pressing something. It's going to do the work for you. Um, it's a bit scary. Um, I know on LinkedIn it's very obvious when I'm talking to a bot as opposed to somebody who's very interested in connecting with me, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, but listen, it's going to be harder and harder for you to discern whether you're talking to a
I
bot or
know,
talking to a human because it's like some of these, examples that you're seeing with generative AI, the voices, the ability to mimic somebody, the ability to mimic. And this is what everybody says, right? This is like kind of first inning of this technology, right? It's like this is the worst this technology is ever going to be. And then you think about it and you say, okay, this becomes 10 times better. I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson or somebody who was basically comparing and saying that, if you compare a chimp to a human and look at like what percent difference there is, and then us to AI, and then you say, no, this thing's going to grow up 10x. It's going to just leave us in the dust because it's just going to, you can't even fathom what a 10x improvement in this piece of technology, all the things that it could do.
yeah. So I think I can end it with maybe not a doomsday scenario, but these are, I mean, this is technology that's powered by energy that's stored in places that have these massive servers that allow this thing to happen. And if somebody decides to infiltrate that infrastructure and disrupt those facilities, it could literally bring us to a halt as civilization, right? If there's no power to the building and the even backup generators, and if there's somebody is going to come up with code that infiltrates bots and screws the whole thing up, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's good. So like you said, with good comes bad, and that's the universe we live in. So, Vic, who's one person that influenced you the most in life? You could point that person and say, yeah, that person had an impact on.
I mean, it's not somebody I know, but it's Simon Sinek. I would say if I go back to a lot of my worldview, I think his Start With Why in a lot of
Mm.
ways, I would say really, really influenced me and, the way I approach a lot of things. It just provides a level of clarity that I've never had. I would say there are other kind of certain books and things like that, which have also uh, influenced me. There's a lean startup book, which really talks
Hmm.
about this concept of running fast experiments to get the product market fit really, really quickly. And so, as a kind of new entrepreneur, the way I look at it is my success is about the speed of experimentation. Because anytime you do something new, you don't know if it's going to work or not.
Correct.
The only way I'll know if it's going to work or not is to do it. And so if I spend 6 months thinking about it and then I start doing it, and it takes 2 months to do it, and then I realize it didn't work, that's 8 months I've lost. Instead, if I can start doing it in 1 month and then keep iterating on it, chances are in 8 months I'll end up much further. It might not be where I thought I was going to end up, but I'll end up someplace that
Yeah.
works. And then
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so I think, Simon Sinek from Start With Why and the Lean Startup book in terms of just a way to approach life has been most impactful to who I am today.
So we both live in New York, so you know Times Square. And if I give you a billboard to put anything you want on there, where millions of people are going to see it, what would you write on?
The one I want to tell people is like, how are you applying Gen AI in your day-to-day life? And the reason, it's like it's partly self-serving, but more importantly, this disruption is the kind that we've never seen because it's going to take away white collar jobs. And the
Mm.
rate at which it's going to take away white collar jobs is going to be much, much faster than anything humans have seen before. Like, you look at the Industrial Revolution, you look at the move from agriculture to industry, you look at the move from kind of industry to technology, and you look at all those shifts. They happened over 20 years, they happened over 30 years. And people had time. Like, yes, the old jobs went away, but a lot of the new people could go to new jobs. This thing's just going to happen in 5 years. And if
Yeah,
you're not
but
ahead of it, you're going to be left holding the
so
bag.
so the people, and that's something else that's kind of scary. Not for me because I'm not at that age group, but usually if you look historically, when there were recessions and people got excessed out, and when they got excessed out, their positions were eliminated. And then when the recession ended and the economy started turning around, we were sitting around and saying, okay, but guess what? We don't really need that job. Okay. Okay. So for me, the term multitasking started in one of the recessions in the 90s where somebody from HR said, instead of hiring three Vics, why don't we just have one Vic and have him do three jobs? So we're
Yeah.
going to say multitasking, right? Which is stupidity because it doesn't work on the human brain. Humans can't multitask, but we convince ourselves we can. So if we take the disruption in terms of white collar jobs being eliminated because machine agents can now do the job better, faster, and they don't call in sick, right? So traditionally, when people got accessed and they came back and there was no job, then you could retrain to do something else. So yeah, there's a whole new industry now about prompt engineering of people who will take your money and teach you how to write prompts for agents. Okay, but a lot of the jobs are going to get eliminated if they're really white collar, low level service jobs.
Oh, not just low
What?
level, high level. Like I,
Okay.
yeah. It's so even prompt engineering, which is very hot today, chances are in 6 months that job will be disrupted because it'll do it itself.
Yeah, by the way, so prompt engineering for my audience is when you talk to a chat GPT or any of those agents, the prompt is the question that you ask the engine, and there's actually a science behind how do you structure the question in order to allow the agent to deliver probably as close as relevant results as you right? If you just ask a generic question, you're going to get garbage. So the whole prompt engineering thing is now get take courses and webinars and spend money and become the prompt engineer of the future. So you're saying those are going to go away because the Gen AI is going to do it themselves
It
anyway.
will. I mean, it's like end of the day, if there is something which tells you how to ask a question of the Gen AI can probably come up with those questions better than you can. And when I was saying low level white collar jobs versus high level, the one industry that I see being disrupted significantly is consultants. You spent a lot of money for highly expensive McKinsey and Deloitte consultants or whatever it is to come and do a lot of strategy work. But if you think about what that strategy work is, it's like taking a lot of unstructured data, reports, interviews, stuff like that, understand it, make sense out of it, come up with a point of view. Gen AI can do that better. And
They,
so,
they
so I can
well,
use one consultant with Gen AI as opposed to five consultants. It's not like the job will go away. It's not like everybody is gone, but the things that I see, even like with the SDR function, so that's a sales development rep for your audience. And these are people that, are typically entry-level salespeople that join a company. They are sending out emails. They're the ones who are cold calling. One SDR with the right AI technology can do the job of 5 SDRs.
Mhm.
And so it's not like the job goes away, but suddenly it's like, I just need fewer of them. And it's much cheaper. And like you said, the AI doesn't go sick. It can work all the time. It can multitask. It has no problems multitasking. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So I
but
don't
it's
know where
happening
that.
fast, right? And like I said, if prompt engineering is a profession that came up a year ago, did not exist a year ago, and it's going to be gone in like another year or 2 years, then that rate of change is not something humans can keep up with.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think your concept of one sales development rep using AI, the power of AI, can do the work of five of them. Same thing applies in marketing, right? So particularly in my universe of small business owners, the people that I talk to and work with, and when you talk about investing in marketing, the first thing is like, oh, I don't have the money to do it. So what is marketing? Well, it's social media, it's copywriting, it's website. That stuff with the right prompt. So why am I paying this marketing person $2,000 a month to do postings where I can actually give the Gen AI a bunch of topics, hit some specifics that have to do with what I deliver, and off you go and you do it.
Yep.
Um,
And today the way it'll work is it'll generate all the output, and then you'll have a human in the loop. And the term over there is basically saying, don't just have it send it out to put it on your social media, because chances are it'll make mistakes.
yeah, yep,
Have somebody just quickly look at it and be like, okay, I like it, this looks good, and then post it. And so, but instead of you having to write it, now all you're doing is just moderating it and making sure it looks good. And so I can do a lot of those.
yep.
And yeah,
Fascinating and interesting. I don't usually ask this question, Vic, but certainly this is your domain. Um, if somebody wanted to work with you, what would be the number one reason they would want to work with
so there are two big things. One is if they need help around go to market. I mean, that's my background. I've looked at all aspects and I've worked in all aspects of go to market. So it's not like I've just got a sales background or I just have a post sales background, pre sales or technical sales. I've seen the whole thing. I've worked in every one of those jobs. So especially when a whole function is getting disrupted, having somebody who can see all aspects of it and has a complete understanding is much better, because I can probably come up with a holistic solution that can
you?
retrofit to your business across the chain rather than just one function. And the second piece of it is question which a lot of people are not asking is, how can I use Gen AI? You need to start experimenting with Gen AI. It's not ready. I'm not in any way saying there's a lot of hype about it and like it's going to do all this stuff. It's not there. You can't just use ChatGPT to do like most of the things we talked about. You need other tools and other technologies. But if you don't start experimenting today, in like a year, you're going to be that much further back. And this thing's changing
Mm,
so fast and moving so fast. So what I tell a lot of my customers is start experimenting, take a project, and it's not that expensive. Like I said, I mean, the access to these tools, technologies. So those are the two things I would tell people. And if you have questions around go to market, or if you're thinking about how to apply Gen AI, or a combination of both,
got it.
that's my
Okay, this
unique
was
differentiator.
fascinating,
Thank you.
exciting, and a bit depressing at the end. I feel bad for the people that are. Um, I mean, they should have. I don't know if they do, but they should have majors in college that are Gen AI majors. So
They
starting to
will,
churn
but so this,
too early. Yeah.
I'll leave you with another depressing thought, which
Okay.
is the rate of change is, I think, what we are going to struggle with. And, if I use like an example from like biology and evolution, the kind of bugs, insects are probably able to react to human induced change just because their lifespans are really small. And so if I die a lot of times, I can, evolve really fast, because I'm getting so many at bats, and every new evolution I can kind of code it into my DNA. But if I am like, a mammal or a tree, I can't react to the rate of change that humans are bringing. And so guess what? I just die and I become extinct. The ones that go extinct are the ones that can't keep up with the rate of change. And I feel like humans are getting to that point where the rate of change that they're bringing with technology is something humans cannot keep up with anymore. The only thing that can keep up with this rate of change is going to be computers and agents and Gen AI and AI. Like if I'm going to flood you with a bunch of emails and a bunch of phone calls, so much so that you're never going to look at your email, guess what? You're going to say, I need an agent that's going to look at all my email and at least give me the ones that I care about. And so suddenly agents are going to talk to agents, and we're
So
going to, because we
yeah,
can't keep up with any of this change. So yeah.
so as you're talking, the one word that comes to my mind is China, right?
Okay.
Because the Chinese have demonstrated that they broke the wall, right? And when they put their mind and resources into something, their rate of change for the Chinese culture, relatively speaking, was phenomenal, right? And still going, still going. Um, are they going to dominate this because they have the 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 people power, the money power, the stuff? Is that what we're looking at?
I mean, I'll
I'm not.
channel my inner Elon Musk for China and say that their biggest challenge is going to be population collapse, right?
Okay.
I mean, the whole one-child policy has put them off in a very kind of bad long term. Not, I mean, I get the cultural rate of change, all of that stuff is good, but end of the day, you need a certain number of people. And if you have an aging population and you don't have enough, the younger people aren't getting married, the ratio between the men and the women is like skewed just because when they had one child, they, kind of,
Yeah.
all the women were sent to the US to be adopted and they all wanted male kids. Now they are kind of realizing the challenges of that. And so that's kind of one aspect of it. I think also China's COVID response does show that this kind of authoritarian regime, if they make the right choice, the beauty about an authoritarian regime is that once something is decided, everybody falls in line and there is no choice and you kind of march in that line.
Yeah.
And so if it's the right decision, it's great. I mean, when China has that, we're going all in on AI, it's great for them because, they're going to go all in on AI and they're going to spend a ton of money. But if they also make the wrong decision, then they're going to go headlong into the ditch and there is,
Mm.
no turning back because. So I don't know, right? I mean, all it takes is another misstep and then, it's a disaster because it's like moving that ship around is hard.
Yeah. I'm not
Yeah.
discounting the U.S. as a powerhouse when it comes to Gen AI, but I think that
Hmm.
the weakness that we have in this country is the lack of attention and resources and focus on computer engineering and those kind of disciplines. So I guess
Well,
China for well, not at the scale that
yeah.
India and China have, right? I mean,
Yeah, but you go look at it, like my son is studying computer science and data science, and they're all looking at it and saying AI is going to do a lot of the coding.
hmm,
So do I need a lot of programmers, right? I mean, this is where we kind of disrupt some of these things. Technology solutions to some of these problems are very, very interesting. I think, we might be in a world where in 5 years, you don't need as many programmers because the AI is taking on a lot of the programming tasks. And so we might solve it that way, right? I mean, it's like same thing. We'll bring manufacturing back, but it's not going to bring jobs back because there's going to be a bunch of robots in those factories and just like a handful of humans running those factories. So manufacturing came back, but it came back in a very different way. And so I think the US will always find technology solutions. And I feel like, Gen AI is kind of one big disruption. I think there are other ones coming, like, quantum computing is going to be a big unknown, which nobody knows what that's going to do, but that's going to take us in a different direction. Nuclear fusion is going to take us in a different direction. So I think, the US, it's still, I mean, the large companies, if you look at now who's spending the money on innovation, it's like, Apple's got what, $2 trillion valuation, Nvidia's 2 trillion. I mean, these are larger than most countries,
yeah.
so they are kind of fueling a lot of the innovation. Yes, the government is taking a step back, not doing as much, but
Hmm.
it all remains to be seen. It's like I'm no futurist and anything else will probably change and something else will come in, but yeah, it'll be
All right.
interesting.
Well, I
All
guess
right.
we'll leave it as that. Vic, thanks so much for your
Thank you.
time. It's been fascinating as I
Same here.
expected it would be. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Zach. Bye.
Bye.